Good evening, everybody. We're coming to you from the swamp, Washington, D.C., and I can tell you we come here rarely and only for the most important of reasons, and that is to speak today with President Trump. President Trump promised voters to drain the swamp, but he's also finding the swamp filled with creatures who are more cunning, more elusive, and more dangerous than even he expected when he was campaigning for the job he now holds. Washington, D.C. is driven by a vast number of political and economic dynamics. Corruption of all kinds is high on that list. The president wants to end that corruption, but first he has to limit it. And that means the Trump presidency is now focused on transformative legislation to cut taxes, to grow both our middle class and the economy itself. The president's tax reform proposal is at the center of the storm that is sweeping Capitol Hill, K Street, and yes, the White House itself. But if the president can pull it all off, he will have delivered a brilliant political stroke that will boost and bolster big business and small and reverse what has been a 2-decade-long shrinkage of our middle class. And President Trump intends to revive and restore the fate and fortunes of not only our middle class, but all Americans who aspire to it. In 9 months in office, you've already accomplished more in the way of job creation. The move in the equities markets has been extraordinary and record-setting. All of the indexes at or near record levels. You have accomplished so much in that 9 months. And yet, as you say, we need tax reform. You're meeting resistance from within your own party. You're meeting resistance from the Democrats. How do you move from here?
Well, I think we're going to get it. I think the senators are going to come together. I think the House is looking really good. You know, they're passing this bill along very rapidly. In fact, that's going to happen hopefully today. And I did make a couple of calls. I said, fellas, please, no changes. Just pass it along. We have to get tax cuts. And just pass it along. Now, normally they want to make their 15 points or their 20 points, and then it has to go back and has to be revoted and everything else. I said, just pass it along. And they said, I think we're going to do that. And let's see what happens. But I think they're going to do that. And so, look, we have actually in the Republican Party, in a true sense, we have great unity. Look at the Democrats with Bernie Sanders, who got absolutely taken advantage of by the DNC. And now you see it, you know, all the stuff coming out. You see what's happening. Right. But you look at Hillary and Bernie, that's big league stuff. We have very, very minor. We have great unity. I was with the Senate yesterday, the entire Republican Senate. And other than two people, I tell you, there was a lot of love in that room.
A lot of love and a lot to get done.
A lot to get done, yeah.
And tax reform is critical because of what you have established as the standard now for economic growth under the Trump presidency. Tax reform is going to be absolutely critical to driving that growth, job creation, and bringing capital back, which you've been talking about for 2 years before you were elected
for many years.
Absolutely.
Hey, for many years before.
So where do we go in terms of capital repatriation for corporate America? How do you incentivize corporations to get back to America with all of that money for investment in jobs, plant, equipment, research and development?
So we have many things. Number one, we're bringing the corporate rate down to 20% from 35%. That's a massive. This will be the biggest tax cut in history, in the history of our country, and that's great. And we need it because right now our country's about the highest taxed, or certainly one of the highest taxed in the world, and we can't have that. So we're going to have a country that's toward the lower end. I can't say it's the lowest. You know, Ireland is going now lower, and others are going lower. They played the game a lot better than our people have played the game, I can tell you that. But we're going to have a country that's going to have tax incentive now, and we are going to bring back, you know, I've been talking, and I even heard you say it not so long ago, $2.5 trillion, but you and I have both been using that number for years.
A conservative
that number is much higher now because it's, you know, built up over the years. And I would be surprised if it weren't close to $4 trillion. That money's coming back. And nobody would bring it back now because the tax is so astronomical, they'd have to be desperate to bring it back. I mean, any company that would bring it back and pay the tax that they'd have to pay, which probably ends up being close to 40%, Who's going to pay that to bring money back in? So what they do is they leave the money in these other places and other countries, and they spend it there, and they create a lot of additional wealth there. We want the money coming back here. But it could be $4 trillion, and what we're doing is substantially lowering the tax, and we're also getting rid of all of the bureaucratic hurdles. It wasn't just a tax. I have friends that want to bring money back. The amount of work they have to do to get the approval to bring the money back is absolutely ridiculous. So that's going away also.
And the middle class, you say this is for the middle class and small business, and the pass-through rates are all very attractive. What do you expect the impact to be for working men and women, the middle class, those who aspire to be in the middle class?
You know, we've done so well, pretty much record-setting, certainly record-setting for 9 months in so many different ways, 9 months of a presidency. But you look at the market, how well it's doing. So you'd say, well, why do you have to do anything? We can actually do better, and I think we will do better. We are going to have so many jobs created by what we're doing. And, you know, we're going to have companies that aren't going to be leaving our country anymore. You look at what's happened over the last 25 years. You go down and take a look at Mexico and see how many car companies have built these massive factories in Mexico. Not here. We want to build in Michigan and Ohio and our places. And they just leave, and they fire everybody, and they go and open up plants. That's not going to be happening anymore. Plus, they're going to be penalized in many different ways. They do it.
You're the first president to talk openly and honestly about offshoring of production, the outsourcing of jobs, millions of jobs.
It's terrible.
That have begun under your administration to come back to the country. The idea that made in America, buy in America, hire in America, how likely is it that that can actually be realized with a business community that has fought those on the wrong side of those issues for a very long time?
Well, you're right, and it's surprising to me. For instance, NAFTA is a horrible agreement, one of the worst trade deals ever. It's just one of the worst, although TPP, which I terminated before it got signed, before it got finished, someday, hopefully, people will be thanking. That would have been one of the great disasters of all times in terms of trade. And a lot of people understand that, but a lot of people don't. But I was very honored to have just terminated that. And we'll do bilateral deals with all those countries. We'll do it great. And if they don't treat us properly, we'll do a termination, or we'll do whatever we want to do. These deals, once you get into them.
How likely is it that there will be a resolution on NAFTA in these current negotiations?
Okay, so I would say this. In order to have a resolution, because right now Mexico and Canada have such a great deal, it's so good that it's very hard for them to get used to the fact that it can't be that way anymore. And as you know, Mexico has an election coming up, and they have a number of people that are running, and they're very pro-Mexico, which is, in fact, they wear a hat, a green hat that says "Make Mexico Great Again." They call them the Donald Trump of politics. They have a couple of them, actually. And it's very hard. I said, you negotiate. I tell my people, I say, right now, it's going to be very hard. And in my opinion, in order to make a fair deal with NAFTA, you have to terminate the deal, and you have to see where you're going to come. And we'll come out. But I think you have to give them, to make a fair deal and a great deal, and you see what's going on. We're being very tough, and we're being very fair. But we have to get back a lot. What's happened to this country with NAFTA is unbelievable. The jobs that have been taken, the factories that are moving out of Michigan, out of Ohio, out of Pennsylvania, out of our states is incredible. So what are the chances? I think the chances ultimately are good. But right now, I think my people are going to have to get tougher.
And
I told them that.
So as you look at an agreement that has, by the most conservative estimates, cost the United States $1 trillion over the course of the past 23 years since its inception.
Well, look at it a different way.
Okay.
We have a trade deficit with Mexico.
Right.
Mexico's wonderful. But we have a trade deficit with Mexico of $71 billion a year. This is Mexico. We're not talking about China, which is much worse.
Right.
We have a trade deficit right now with Mexico of $71 billion. People can't believe it. We have trade deficits. Well, we have trade deficits with almost everybody. But we're changing that.
When you focus first on free trade, people, oh my gosh, he's talking like an isolationist, a protectionist. And then they started looking at the numbers to see that we are, amongst all of our trading partners, that this country is the only one who said, please take what you want. We don't have to have a mature, intelligent relationship with you. We don't have to have balanced trade. Every other major partner does precisely that.
The WTO, World Trade Organization, was set up for the benefit of everybody but us.
Right.
They have taken advantage of this country like you wouldn't believe. And I say to my people, you tell them. Like, as an example, we lose all the lawsuits, almost all of the lawsuits in the WTO, within the WTO, because we have fewer judges than other countries. It's set up. You can't win. In other words, the panels are set up so that we don't have majorities. It was set up for the benefit of taking advantage of the United States. NAFTA, and I tell people, and I tell good people, they hear me, I'm going to be very tough with NAFTA, right. But they hear I'm getting tough with it. They say, oh, please don't touch it. And I say, listen, I'm going to make the deal better. Oh, don't touch it. I said, supposing I don't terminate it, but I make it better. Oh, don't touch it. And I say, why would they not want me to make it better? Even if, assuming you leave it the way it is, which we may or we may not. It depends how the negotiation turns out. We may not. But look, they don't even want you to touch it, even if you tell them we're going to make it better. Then you say to yourself, what's going on? And then you say, well, they must be on the other side of the deal, too. Mm-hmm. And they are. They have companies that have factories in Mexico.
U.S.
But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested here.
Here, America first. So how does President Trump feel about the bombshell revelations that the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic nominees' campaign are the ones who funded the smear campaign against presidential candidate Donald Trump, the man who would go on to win the presidency?
Don't forget, Hillary Clinton totally denied this. She didn't know anything. She knew nothing. All of a sudden it found out. What I was amazed at, it's almost $6 million that they paid, and it's totally discredited. It's a total phony. I call it fake news. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful.
We'll be right back with a man who almost single-handedly is changing the direction of this country and changing it for the better. We continue live from Washington, D.C. Stay with us. We're coming to you tonight, as you can well see, here in Washington, D.C., where the president and I sat down in the cabinet room of the White House to hear his thoughts about tax reform, an economy that he has spurred to better than 3% growth over the past 6 months, markets that have added more than $5 trillion in market cap since he was elected president. And the president today showed no sign of either slowing down or being overmatched in any way by any politician or opposing institution that would deny him his vision for our country's future. Now the president's thoughts on Hillary Clinton, the democratically funded and discredited dossier contrived and paid for by the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign. The role of business in this country, critical, fundamental to the country's well-being and its future, to the creation of jobs. But business has taken such a voice in this town, in this swamp, that you are the only countervailing influence to that dominance of U.S. multinationals in this country. And it's the country owes you a great debt on so much, but on that in particular.
Wow, it's very interesting. It's well put. It's true.
And you have focused from June 16th of 2015 on the relationship of our borders, our sovereignty, our economy, whether you're looking at the opioid crisis in this country or the import of drugs that all crosses that border. You're being pushed back against by the leadership of the House and the Senate on the issue of funding a wall in its entirety. You have been pushed back against, talking about changing all of those trade agreements. Again, all the external issues that are so critical to the country's future, your vision for this country. How in the world are we going to be able to deal with all of these issues if you if you cannot bring the Republican Party together?
I really think they're coming along. I really do. I think they are coming along. One thing you didn't mention, which you will mention, and I know you talk about it, is the power of the pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, yes.
We pay so much more for the same pill, prescription drugs, than other countries. You go to Canada, people go to Canada to buy prescriptions. We pay for the exact same pill, made from the same plant, the same company. We pay, in many cases, many, many times more than they're paying in other countries. Right. So we're subsidizing the world in terms of prescription drugs. It's ridiculous, and it's going to stop. The problem I have is these companies give so much, I mean, the contributions are massive, just massive, the amount. But there are a lot of good people that are seeing what's going on, and I think we'll be successful in that. Next week, I'm going to be declaring an emergency, a national emergency on drugs. The opioid is a tremendous emergency. What's going on there? The drugs pouring into the country have gotten, and I tell you what, we've made a big impact, but still, we need the wall. You know, part of the reason we need the wall is for drugs.
For drugs?
Forgetting even about people. We need a wall for drugs. And the wall's coming along. You know, we're building right now prototypes. We have 6 prototypes. I'm going to be looking at them over the next 3 weeks.
Do you have a favorite yet?
Well, you know, it's funny. It's very interesting. I'm almost glad you asked, because it's actually pretty easy to understand. You think of a wall as a wall.
Yeah.
But honestly, you do need some see-through ability, because you don't know if you do pure concrete, which is a wall, then you can't see who's on the other side. You know, you have a wall that's this thick, and you can't see who's on the other side. So we're going to need some see-through abilities. So I'm going to be going down. We actually have 6 prototypes that are all very top of the line, done with Homeland Security. We have some incredible people. If you look at the Border Patrol, if you look at the ICE agents, and I've had the
Tough job.
But I've had the people at that level. Those are the people, they know so much. They know more than anybody. And they also know the wall and the wall systems. And we're going to take a look at the wall, and we're going to get it built, and it's going to be quite the wall. It's going to be very effective.
You're obviously enthused about what you're going to get done. You've got to be immensely gratified at what you've been able to do, often with a recalcitrant Congress and Senate. Going forward, there's another wall, and there's a wall that's just fallen between the American public, the Democratic National Committee, and Hillary Clinton's campaign. Right. They funded something called the Trump dossier, which they ballyhooed for some time. We now know who paid for it. The DNC and Hillary Clinton, and one as yet unnamed Republican. You want to
wonder who that might be?
Do you have a sense?
I think I know, but you know, I'll let them find out. They're going to find out eventually, just like they did. Don't forget, Hillary Clinton totally denied this. She didn't know anything. She knew nothing. All of a sudden, it found out. What I was amazed at, it's almost $6 million that they paid, and it's totally discredited. It's a total phony. I call it fake news. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful.
I think her word that she likes to use that's so serviceable about that dossier, debunked. It's been debunked.
Well, and then I understand recently she said, well, opposition research is very standard. So, you know, it's very interesting. She denied it. Her own people denied it. Everybody denied it. And now they're sort of scooting around trying to figure out what to say. So they spent, if you think of it, almost $6 million on something like that. And I think, honestly, I just think it's a disgrace.
And contemporaneously, suddenly the House Intelligence Committee, the House Oversight Committee are turning to the Democratic Party and but beginning the investigation of something called collusion with the Russians.
That's the real collusion. Believe me.
Your thoughts?
There was no collusion on my side, I can tell you that. Right. Everybody knew it. You knew it because you were saying it when it was not in vogue. But I always said, and I had no idea how right I was because I didn't realize it would be to this extent.
Right.
But I always said this was an excuse for losing the election put out by the Democrats, and that's what it was. But then when you hear the kind of money they spent, and when you see all of the things about Podesta, and you see all of the relationships that they actually have with Russia, and you see in ours, you know, one thing that is interesting, and I have to say, even the Democrats, they walk out of those meetings and they say, no, there is no collusion, and we haven't found any yet, but we'll keep going.
Right.
A wonderful man came to my office a week ago, a very highly respected man, and he sat down and he said, you know, it's been very unfair. From the day you have been president, you've been under this little veil of Russia, Russia, Russia. Mm-hmm. Now, with all of this being said, I want to say this. I think it would be great if we got along with Russia. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting, you know, they are a power, they're a nuclear power. I think we could have a good relationship. I think the North Korean situation would be easier settled. I just spoke to the president of China. Right. I congratulated him on his big victory. But it would be wonderful if we could speak to China and Russia, because China is helping us, and maybe Russia's going through the other way and hurting what we're getting. I mean, when I say maybe, I think I know exactly what I'm talking about. If we had a relationship with Russia, that would be a good thing, not a bad thing.
Relationships, you were criticized for even trying to court, if you will, President Xi of China. Everyone, the so-called intelligentsia of this country's foreign policy establishment, said you're wasting your time. It just can't be done. And obviously, you've made significant progress with him. And
just spoke to him a few minutes ago, just before I walked into the room. You know, something has been given to him that's never been, it's really virtually never happened in China. He's been given powers that nobody's,
and written into the Constitution.
He's a powerful man. I happen to think he's a very good person. Mm-hmm. Now, with that being said, he represents China. I represent the USA. So, you know, there's going to always be conflict, but we have a very good relationship. People say we have the best relationship of any president, because he's called president also. Now some people might call him the king of China, but he's called president. But we have a very good relationship, and that's a positive thing. And it would be good to have that relationship with Russia and other countries too. Hopefully
the whole world. Anything to report to America on your conversation with President Xi?
No, but I'll be going there in 2 weeks, and we're going to Beijing and other places, wherever he'd like to take me, and we'll be spending 2 days there, and we're going also to Japan and South Korea, and it will be, I think, hopefully it's historic and positive, and we have to solve the North Korea problem. It's a very big problem. It should have never been given to me. This should have been solved long before I came to office, when it would have been easier to solve. But it was given to me, and I get it solved. I solve problems. I'm very happy with the way the markets are going. I'm very happy with, you know, all of the regulation cuts and all of the things we've done, and that's what's driving the markets.
And up next, as we continue our conversation with the president, he talks about taking on the GOP establishment, Democrats, the left-wing media, the deep state, and of course all of them at the same time, just to make it fair.
I came in, I said, I'm going to fight like hell. I didn't realize it's even more so than I thought. But that's the way it is, and that's good.
Also, a very big hint from the president about who he will choose to lead the Fed when we come back, live tonight from Washington, D.C. We're tonight in the capital of the country, Washington, D.C., also variously known as the Swamp. Today, I talked with the president about all that he has achieved in the first 9 months of his presidency, his thoughts on those who attack him relentlessly and those who admire him greatly, his thoughts on Hillary Clinton and the dossier. Here is more of our conversation today. We begin with the president's thoughts about a major decision he will make in a matter of days: who will be the next chief of the Federal Reserve. You're nearing a decision on who will chair the Fed?
I am.
Any hints?
So I really have it down to 2 and maybe 3 people, and I think over the next very short period of time I'll be announcing it. It won't be a big shock. You know, it's sort of interesting the way it comes out. And you've been talking about the various people on your show, which I watch absolutely almost all the time, even if it means TiVo or whatever device you happen to be using at the time.
We appreciate it.
But no, your show is fantastic. So I'll be announcing this over the next pretty short period of time.
All right. And
do you have a preference out of curiosity?
I do. And
tell me who your preference is.
I think may I constrain myself because an ad hoc advisor to the president.
No, but I'd love to hear it. You can even cut it out if you want. You don't have to. I would love to hear you. I only want that from people I respect.
I personally believe that Janet Yellen might be worth keeping.
I'll tell you what, she was in my office 3 days ago. She was very impressive. I like her a lot. I mean, it's somebody that I am thinking about. I would certainly think about it. In one way, I have to say...
I haven't been utterly rejected.
No. In one way, I have to say you like to make your own mark.
Right.
You understand that.
Absolutely.
You like to make your own mark, which is maybe one of the things she's got a little bit against her. But I think she's terrific. We had a great talk, and we're obviously doing very well together. You look at the markets.
And I'm saying that, by the way, not being any fan of interest rate hikes by the Fed here, and as have been discussed since December of 2015. I have to ask you in conclusion, and I really appreciate your time, as does our audience. You came into this job fighting like hell, and you are fighting like hell every day.
More than I thought. I came in, I said, I'm going to fight like hell. I didn't realize it's even more so than I thought. But that's the way it is, and that's good.
And I've got to ask you, I mean, you're one of the most, I would say, by the left particularly, reviled, even hated men to ever hold your post.
I would say so.
You're also one of the most loved and respected.
I would say that also.
In history. And how does that feel? Where is Donald Trump today as you are just now beginning your presidency?
So the one thing that I really thought, because I thought I was treated very unfairly by the press during the campaign. And when I won, I said, the good news is now they'll start treating me well. But they got much worse. Right. Lou, they put on stories on CNN, on NBC, and CBS and ABC, and NBC being an offshoot also with the MSNBC, which is ridiculous. They put on stories that are so false. They have so-called sources that, in my opinion, don't exist. You know, they'll say, sources have said. They're sitting down, they make it up. It is so dishonest. It is so fake. And, you know, I have come up with some pretty good names. So people, I think one of the best names is, you know, I've really started this whole fake news thing. Now, they've turned it around, and then now they're calling, you know, stories put out by Facebook fake, and they're fake. What could be more fake than CBS and NBC and ABC and CNN? When you look at some of these stories, and when you look at the amount of negative, I know when I do well and when I do badly. I know a good story from a bad story. But when you have a really good story and they make it bad, I'll say to my wife, oh, tonight I'm going to enjoy watching television because I did great. And wait till you see this. And then they put it on and it's like, oh, that's not so good. They are fake news. And the good thing about social media is that I have so many millions of people. So many. I guess 128 million. You could add up, you know, you add up all the different platforms. Massive social media. At least I can put out. It's not that I want to do that. I'd rather not do it. I would love to not do it at all. But at least I can put out the truth and I can put out the real word. And people agree. And if you look at the level of approval of media, of general media, if you look at it from the day I started running to now, I'm so proud that I have been able to convince people how fake it is because it has taken a nosedive. Yeah. Except for your show, of course, and Sean and a few of them, right? Yeah. There's some very good ones. And I have to say, Fox has treated me fairly. And I don't mean good, but they've treated me fairly. I don't want to be treated good. I just want to be treated fairly.
Well, you are, if I may say, everything is advertised as you ran for president, and appreciate everything you're doing. Thanks so much.
We're getting it done. I will promise you we're getting it done. And it's happened. A lot has already happened. Thank you very much. It's an honor.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you.
President Donald Trump. Joining me now, Chris Farrell. He's the Director of Investigations and Research at Judicial Watch. Chris, it's great to see you here tonight.
Good to be with you.
Your reaction. This president has been fighting through half of his presidential campaign against some of the most salacious and ignorant, contrived nonsense spewed by smear machines. And yet here's a man, as you saw there. he is, throughout that today, he is ebullient even. He's not just simply up. He is strong, and he is being savaged every day in every possible outlet in the country, it seems, left-wing outlet. Your reaction?
Well, I think it's interesting to look at him as you interviewed him and just kind of take him in as just talking to you, right? That kind of format, and then bounce it against the fusion GPS kind of make-believe world where they would have you believe he's a maniac or he's unstable or whatever. And, you know, this isn't opposition research by the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign and these fusion operatives. This is opposition manufacturing. They are making things up. There's a difference between, hey, let's go look at this guy's background, and hey, let's just go make stuff up, and that's what we're seeing.
It goes to me, Chris, well beyond that. Here is a group of people at GPS Fusion, the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Committee. We know they conspired to defraud Bernie Sanders and give the nomination to Hillary. They're not just making things up, they're defrauding the American people. They are a vicious smear machine, and basically we're appealing to the Democratic Party throughout successfully to protect them from subpoenas, to ignore all that they are, and let's all pretend that somehow they have First Amendment protection.
Yeah, we've moved into the world of crimes. This is no longer a disagreement on policy. It's not a disagreement on politics or point of view or left-right. We're now talking about crimes. Crimes have been committed, and in this case, unlike Mr. Mueller, where there's no criminal predicate, I can tell you what the crimes are with respect to Fusion GPS.
And no criminal predicate when it comes to the charge of collusion against Trump and
Russia. Russia nonsense. There's nothing there. You want to talk about Hillary Clinton's emails? 18 U.S.C. Section 793F. I can tell you the crime that was committed. You want to talk about people colluding and manufacturing things? How about even a civil rights claim of actual malice? You want to talk about a First Amendment lawsuit? The president could easily bring both a Privacy Act and an actual malice claims personally, because he knows that people have just manufactured nonsense and then published it recklessly as though it were real. So I would encourage people to go contact their attorneys and look up some definitions.
Mueller, Weissman, Rosenstein. As the list builds around the special counsel and the top of the FBI and is connected to the FBI informant who's been under a gag order now for some considerable time, denied the opportunity to speak to the United States Congress, the representatives of the people. What is your reaction? I mean, at some point, the Democratic Committee, National Committee, has to be held accountable for conspiring, colluding with the Russians. I mean, look at the plethora of just absolute ignorant affronts against the American people.
There are very grave national security questions attached to the DNC with respect to that whole server nonsense. Where they said, oh, we had CrowdStrike come in and look at it. Nothing there.
Why would the FBI? Why would they ever roll over and say, allow themselves to be told to go home? We'll take care of it from here by the DNC.
Correct. And then the other half of that is what you finished up with respect to, let's walk back 7 years and look at the cast of characters who were looking at the uranium story then. And then you're talking about Mueller and Comey, and so it becomes very, they're engaged in a cover-up. Let's just call it what it is. They are engaged. You didn't hear about it till now because the people who were actively involved in it 7 years ago put a cap on it.
The FBI has much to answer for, its leadership, and the fact of the matter is, it appears to me that there is no way that this FBI can be allowed to exist in its current form with this leadership.
Yeah, I know it sounds radical, but it should probably be disestablished and then rechartered as another agency with a complete house cleaning. The current environment, the operating environment, the climate there, it can't go on this way.
All right. Chris Farrell, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And the beat goes on.
It does.
And again, thanks for all you and Judicial Watch do to help the people find out what little we know. We'll
At least there's some.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. President Trump telling me today he believes Republicans are united on tax reform. We'll have reaction to my interview when we come back live here in Washington, D.C. The swamp so far is staying away. They're giving me enough room. I promise we'll be out of here soon. Coming to you live tonight from Washington, D.C., where earlier today I talked with the president at the White House. Joining me now to react to what was said in that wide-ranging interview by the nation's leader, senior editor for The Federalist, Molly Hemingway. Molly, great to see you. And Washington Times opinion editor, Charlie Hurt, both Fox Business contributors. Charlie, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Molly, your thoughts about first the president. He continues to have immense energy. He is absolutely up in a forward profile, going against all of his enemies. He doesn't rage against his enemies. He attempts to simply, bring peace and warmth to their existence. It's amazing.
On the energy alone, I'm really impressed by it, and I'm decades younger than he is, and I have far less energy.
And
so
young
I would like
kids.
to know, I'd like to know the secret there, but.
Yeah, he's an incredible warrior. I mean, he really is a political warrior.
Yeah, and I think he really does not care what anybody thinks. And, obviously he picks the fights that he gets into. Usually I think he picks them for a very particular reason. And we saw that with the NFL. And he taps into things. And of course, everybody's first reaction is, oh, this is insane. This is crazy. This is unpresidential. And then, 24 hours later, he's hit a nerve that really does matter to me.
An alert to all of the broadcasters. I mean, apparently there are discussions in the NFL. They've been so hard hit that Thursday night football is at risk here.
Right. Well, there was an aspect of that where people had already kind of started to be frustrated with the NFL, and he does a very good job of having his finger on the pulse of what Americans are expressing. But I also think it's interesting, some of these tweets, we talk about how he drives conversations with tweets. And last week he had a tweet about wondering if the Clintons and the DNC and the FBI and the Russians all paid for the dossier. And then here we are just a few days later, and everybody acted like that was the craziest thing you could say. And here we are just a few days later, and it turns out, once again, we're having reports about the FBI trying to pay for it, the Clintons admitting they paid for it, the DNC admitting that they paid for it. I mean, it's really funny to watch the difference in how people react to these tweets.
No matter how much they hate him, the guy continues to set the agenda week after week.
Would you not think that it would occur to the left, the deep state, the GOP establishment, at some point to acknowledge his intelligence, his knowledge, and his certain vision of this country's future and its values? They're absolutely fundamental to achieving that future.
You don't even have to agree with him,
Right.
but I am surprised that so many people in the establishment continue to be confused about his appeal or about what his vision is, and that's, I think, why they're not having a very good run of things trying to present their own message, because they don't actually understand Trump's appeal or how he was able to win this election or continue to have appeal with many people.
And in the midst of all of this, the JFK files that have been buried in the National Archives for 54 years. His first decision is a decision for the people.
Yeah.
He is a populist. He is an American populist, and he says, open up the files.
And it's why at the core of this, he may not be able to recite the Federalist Papers and things like that. But
Don't take offense, Molly.
but he understands that stuff at a fundamental level, and he understands that knowing what's in those files is the right of the American people. And I think that's why he sticks by so many of these things. And of course Molly's exactly right in terms of the way the GOP establishment has completely failed to understand the genius of the guy. They give him no credit whatsoever, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's such a threat to them, and threat to everyone here in Washington, but to them in particular, because he does get it.
And what's fun as an interloper coming into the swamp here.
In your swamp.
Just exactly, visiting. And that is, these people all want to judge him by who they are, the way they dress, the way they think, which is all contributory to what a mess we're in, and he's the man to fix it.
It's so much about style, and they don't like his style.
Molly, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Charlie, thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Good to see you both. The president today calling it a $6 million piece of fake news. Congressman Ron DeSantis talks about the discredited Trump dossier and the rest of my exclusive interview with the president. That's next when we come back live tonight for you from Washington, D.C. Well, breaking news tonight. We have just received word from the Justice Department. They have lifted the gag order on the FBI informant. They've just authorized the informant to disclose to the chairman and ranking members of the Senate Committee on the Judiciary, the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, as well as one member of each of their staffs, any information or documents that he has concerning alleged corruption or bribery involving transactions in the uranium market, including, but not limited to, anything related to Vadim Makarin, Rosatom, 10X, Uranium One, or, are you ready, the Clinton Foundation. I'm joined now by a man who has been instrumental in Congress turning its attention and focus to the corruption that has been running rampant through Washington for some time, and we can turn to the Clintons for much of the explanation. Congressman Ron DeSantis is a member of several House committees. I just mentioned a couple of them. House Judiciary and Oversight. He's also a member of the Freedom Caucus. What is your reaction, Congressman, to that news?
Well, first, let me just say, with you being in Washington, I can feel the swamp draining a little bit. So good to have you here. And look, this is huge news. I expected this. I had been in touch with DOJ. I've been in touch with the informant's attorney. It seemed like this is the direction they wanted to go. Of course, we were prepared to subpoena him anyway, so we were going to get it. Now that this is lifted, he not only is going to provide testimony, he has documents that he's going to provide as well. So we're going to go through all of that. This is stuff that the American people have been due to them for an awful long time.
This has been a remarkable swing. First of all, we learn about the depth of the corruption under the Obama administration. It looks as though it was orchestrated within that administration, not just by the Clintons, but others, including the FBI and senior officials there. Bob Mueller, who is the special counsel. I mean, there are huge, as you have pointed out, huge questions about the very people we have in positions of power to protect the public interest.
And the main Russian protagonist, Makarin, was prosecuted in Baltimore in federal court. Some say it was a curious, relatively light deal. And who was the U.S. attorney there? Rod Rosenstein, who's now the deputy attorney general in the Justice Department, and the man who appointed Bob Mueller as the special counsel. So this all comes full circle here. But here's the thing, and you've been on this from day one. We've been talking about Trump-Russia collusion for how many months? Yeah. No evidence of that. But the evidence of Democrat collusion with Russia is significant. You have this issue, obviously, which is big. You have Fusion GPS. Give me a break.
Yeah, give the country a break as well, because the American people know that there is much that we have to learn here. And to see the FBI run by people who dishonor the agents who make up that great institution, to watch political candidates who have just defiled public trust, it is just stunning. And to see the opportunity now to at least begin to learn the truth. And I've got to ask you this. Are you confident that we're going to learn the truth now?
I am more confident than I've ever been, let's put it this way. I mean, I've been coming on your show for months and years saying we needed to do the foundation and this. We are doing it now. We're fully engaged in it. And I think that this informant's got a lot of information to offer. And here's the thing. What he has, I think, is going to be significant. But then what he can tell us to then go seek is going to be important. And there's a lot for the Congress to do because there's a lot of potential corruption. But guess what? We may need another special counsel in the Justice Department if there are criminal acts that are uncovered, additional criminal acts.
And we need grand juries, and we need prosecutors, and we need to make certain that some people pay for what they have done to this country.
Look, this is a government of, by, and for the people. With all of this, from how the FBI, Justice Department at the highest level operated for years, that is not what the American people expect. That is far below the standard. And this is the beginning of really draining the bureaucratic swamp.
Well, Congressman, we thank you for your contributions to making that a reality, and it's great to see you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Congressman Ron DeSantis. we have a lot of people to thank, but I want to start by thanking an Attorney General who I've been pretty hard on. That's Jeff Sessions. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. That's it for us tonight. We thank all of you for being with us. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross among our guests tomorrow, and Chairman Kevin Brady.